Hi, this is Stephanie Lotvin of Tellybean Knits, and today I'm going to show you how to sew in colors 1, 2, and 6 near the join of your Halloween Party Mystery Knit Along. So when we joined in the round, I have left those strands of yarn loose so that I can show you how I weave in those ends to make the join particularly secure on my Halloween Party Mystery Cowl. For this tutorial, I will be showing the cowl in progress, but I'm only about partway through clue 6 at this point. So if you have not completed clue 6, then this is a good time to pause the video, come back once you have completed that clue, and that way you will not see the clue in progress. So this is a spoiler alert. For this tutorial, you will need a pair of scissors and a tapestry needle, and you're going to need your cowl. So let me show you where I'm at right now. Okay, right now I have the wrong side of my work facing out, and you can see I have 3 ends. I've actually already gone ahead and put color 2 on a tapestry needle, so I'm ready to weave that end in. I've got my little skeleton starting to appear, and this is a DK weight version of the cowl that I'm working on. I'm really enjoying it and super excited that I'm on the color work. Right now, I want to make sure that I get those ends weaved in securely. If you've ever watched any of my other weaving in ends videos, you'll know that there is not one set method that I use to weave in ends. I think of every project as a new adventure, but I do repeat some techniques again and again. So you may have seen some of these techniques in previous videos, but I just want to show you how I work it for this cowl. One of the things about this cowl that is a little bit trickier than in previous cowls is that you'll see we have 3 working ends right next to the join. So you can see here I have my color 2 right here where we joined in the round, and then we joined 2 colors. We joined color 1 and color 6 when we started that color work chart. So all 3 of those strands, those ends, are very close to the join, so we just need to get those in securely. So this is something else that I am a huge proponent of when it comes to weaving in ends, and that is what I'm looking to do is make sure that all of the ends are woven in as securely as possible. This is the neck opening of my cowl, and I'm going to be putting that on over my head a lot. My kids are going to use this. We're going to stretch that a lot, and so I want this joint to be as secure as possible, and I don't want any of the ends to pop out on the right side of my work. So for me, the goal is to make sure that the ends are secure. What the ends look like on the wrong side of my work is less important to me than making sure that the ends are woven in securely and nothing is showing on the right side of my work. So let's get started with color 2. With color 2, right now I have the end of this strand of yarn facing me, which is on the wrong side of my work. You can see if you look carefully that it's actually coming from the right-hand side of the join. So there is a gap here, and I want to close that gap. I want to close that gap, and I want to make this join in the round, or this join from joining round 1 as secure as possible where those 2 come together. You can see if I pull on that, it really loosens that gap up, and I want to make sure that I close that gap and make it extra strong. So right now I'm coming from the right hand side, and what I want to do is I'm going to turn the top of my cowl up just a little so I can see the top ridge of that rolled edge. You can see that that rolled edge makes little V's along the top edge of my cowl. What I want to do to make this look as clean as possible and to make sure that this is secure is I'm going to insert my needle behind 2 legs of one of those little V's. So I'm going to insert that behind those 2 legs. You can see I've caught both legs, and this is on the left-hand side of my cowl. So the yarn is coming from the right-hand side, and I'm coming across behind 2 legs along the top of that rolled edge. I'm going to bring the yarn through, and then I'm going to come back to the right hand side. I'm going to identify another one of these little V's. You can see the little V's are worked also along that top edge of the rolled edge, and I'm just going to come back across to the right hand side, and I'm going to once again insert my needle behind 2 of those legs So behind two of those legs, one of those little V's, and I'm going to bring my yarn through, and I'm just going to gently pull that closed. So I have a gap here, and I'm gently pulling that gap closed. And then I'm going to insert into the center of the first little V I went under. So right now I have two legs of this little V, and that was the little V that I first inserted on the left-hand side. I'm going to insert my needle into the center of that V and then come back out to the wrong side of my work to close that gap. Nice and neat. So you can see on the wrong side, I've closed the gap. I'm just going to flip that over. Right side, I've closed the gap. And now I'm going to move the two strands, the strand of color 1 and color 6, out of the way. And what I'm going to be doing is I would like to move this strand down to where color 2 and color 6 are coming up next to each other. You can see the little pearl bumps from color 2, and you can see hiding behind these strands from color 1, the color 6 bumps. I want to come along that ridge where those two colors meet. And I'm just going to get there. I'm not just going to jump down. I'm going to insert my needle behind a stitch so that catches the little strand that I've created, that I'm going to be creating there. Just so I'm not creating a long strand, I'm sort of catching that float. You can see nothing's showing on the right hand side, or on the right side of my work. So now I'm quite close to that place where color 2 and color 6 meet. And what I want to do is I would like to duplicate the stitches in color 2 along this ridge where color 2 and color 6 meet. Now, because of these long floats from color 1, I'm just going to have to keep that out of the way temporarily and just sort of gently move that out of the way so that I can see where those two colors meet and I can duplicate those stitches. So I'm going to come behind that float so that I can come where those two colors meet. And now you can see if I pull in this direction, it starts to tug at the float. So whenever I go to duplicate those stitches, I'm going to make sure I don't come too far over to stretch out that float. So I'm going to start duplicating the stitch just to the left of where that float connects back into my cowl for color 1. So I'm going to insert my needle behind this pearl bump from color 6 and bring that through. And then I'm just going to duplicate the stitches along this ridge by running my yarn, following color 2 to duplicate those stitches. And I'm going to do this for about an inch. Duplicate some color 2 stitches. I find that an inch is a good amount for this method. And as I come to the places where the floats are captured, I just want to make sure that I go behind that float. While I'm working on this, I just want to point out, if you have a different method for weaving in your ends, that is perfectly all right. I really advocate for using a method that works best for you. Just because this method works well for me does not mean it is a method that you have to use. You should use the method that you are most comfortable with and that gives you the best results. This is the method that gives me the best results near the join. I've made a lot of these cowls at this point, and this is the one that I like the most. All right. I've duplicated the color 2 stitches to the left of the place where our two ends of the cowl met at the join. You can see right here is where I have been duplicating those stitches. Now this last little bit is what makes it really secure for me. I like to use the tip of my tapestry needle, and what I like to do is I like to go back across these duplicate stitches, and I'm just going to catch a couple of plies both from the duplicate stitch and from the original stitch that was duplicated along this ridge. And the reason that I'm doing this is this helps to lock in where I have woven in that end and make it extra secure. So I have just inserted my tapestry needle into a few plies on the wrong side of my work from both the duplicate stitch and the stitch that was duplicated. I'm just going to flip this over so you can see the right side. There is no sign of the needle on the right side. I like to check this when I'm weaving in ends. If you see a lot of silver poking out on the right side, then you're probably going to see where you pull the needle through on the right side of the work. So it's always nice while the needle is still inserted just to peek at the right side of your work and make sure nothing is showing. And so for me, nothing is showing. And I can go ahead and pull that yarn through. And then I also will occasionally go up here and see if there are any other places where I can capture my yarn. And I go back in the other direction and I capture a few plies from the duplicate stitch at the top of that ridge. And you may be thinking, wow, this is a lot of securing of yarn happening on the wrong side of my work. And that is absolutely true. I know that this is going to get a lot of love, this cowl. And I also know this is a hard working portion of the cowl. At the head or at the neckline where you insert your head, this is going to get a lot of stretch. So I want to make sure that that end does not move. So I'm just going to pull that through. So I just caught a few plies going back towards the join, and then I went back in the other direction. And for the final step, I'm going to pull on the yarn, make sure that it is in a good position. Double check the right side of your work. Everything looks nice and clean on the right side. You can see here is where I made the loop, so I'm just going to give that a tug, and that is definitely secure. I have closed the gap, and it is a good place, and it is nice and strong. And so now I'm going to cut my yarn, and as a final step, I like to fray the end of my yarn. So I'm just pulling apart those little plies so that they create a kind of frayed end. And the reason that I do this is that when it's frayed, it means for me that the little ends of this strand of yarn are not going to pop through to the right side when I'm wearing the cowl, because it is going to regularly be stretched on, and because I'm still planning to block this cowl, there's a possibility it would pop through to the right side. But for me, fraying these ends makes it so that it is less likely to pop through to the right side. It has something to grab onto. Over time, I also find that these ends will felt to my piece, which makes it even more secure. And after you block, or after you've been wearing your cowl, if you find that the tail is securely in place and is not moving and you'd like to trim these down, you can always do that. I usually leave mine a little longer. All right, now that we have woven in the color 2 end and it looks really nice on the right side of my work, it's time to weave in the color 6 end. I want to leave the color 1 end for last because it is, especially at the beginning where the chart started, it is worked in long floats across here, so there's not an easy place to duplicate stitches along the join of 2 colors. So I will show you how to work that one last. So I'm just going to pop that out of the way. Now that we've closed the gap at the color 2 join, I want to make sure, I'm going to just look at this. You may find that your stitches are a little loose in either color 1 or color 6. I like to turn to the right side of my work and just give those stitches a gentle pull to even out the tension. You may also find that there is a tiny gap right here below color 2. It will probably be small, but it may be a little larger for you. Some of that will be closed up when you gently pull on color 1 and color 6, but there also may just be a little gap here because of where you joined your yarn whenever you started your chart. So one of the things that I like to do to help close this off is right now, this is the stitch that I just created. This little V is the V that I created when I wove in my color 2 end. So when I did that, I worked the color 2 from the right-hand side to the left-hand side, and then I came across on the left-hand side of the join where the two ends met. And since I did that, I came across on the left-hand side, I now want to come across on the right-hand side. So I'm going to weave in this end, and I'm going to move across the right-hand side of my work. So to do this, I want to once again duplicate stitches in color 6 where color 2 and color 6 meet. Now I'm going to come across this gap, and I'm going to actually begin by coming under any color 1 floats and just gently bring that yarn across from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And then I'm going to move this little color 1 float out of the way so that I can see where I can start duplicating stitches. And I'm going to start duplicating stitches right along this ridge between color 2 and color 6. And I'm going to come from below first, partly because I came under a color 1 float. If I go above, it might pull on that float. And so I'm just going to come underneath that float from below to start duplicating those stitches. And by working across from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, it helps to pull that gap between at the beginning of that row closed just a little bit because you have tension from the left-hand side. Now, I would advise not pulling this too tight to create a pucker. We don't want this to pucker on the right side. So you can pull it and then look at the right-hand side or at the right side and then just give this a gentle stretch. Not a really big stretch because you don't want a long float necessarily, but you just want a gentle stretch there. And now that I am comfortable with the tension on that yarn, I'm going to start duplicating the stitch. I'm just going to follow the color 6 stitches along this edge to duplicate those stitches on the wrong side of my work. And one of the reasons I like to duplicate the stitches is because it is more likely to make it invisible. And since you do have some color 1 stitches along that joining edge, it's always good to pop the work to the right side and just check to make sure you're not actually accidentally covering things. You're keeping it all on the wrong side of your work. And I'm just going to duplicate those stitches for about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. And now that I've duplicated those stitches, I'm going to once again use the tip of my tapestry needle to catch a few plies from the stitches that I duplicated and the stitch that was duplicated, so the stitch that you followed, to make that extra secure. And then I'm going to look at the right side to make sure I don't see any silver from my needle. It's looking good. I'm going to bring that yarn through. Don't want to pull that too tight. And then I'm going to come back across the top of those stitches where I duplicated the stitch and grab a few plies once again. I'm going to peek at the right side of my work, and I do not see any silver showing in that color 6, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that through. I'm going to take my tapestry needle off, and I'm going to give that a gentle pull in all directions to lengthen that tail so that whenever this is stretched over my head, I'm not shortening that tail too much after I've already cut the yarn. So now I'm going to snip my yarn, and then I'm going to fray my end. Okay. For the final end, our color 1 end, we're going to weave this in a little differently. Now, if you've watched any of my colorwork videos for weaving in stranded colorwork ends, you'll know that every project is an adventure and there is no one technique that works for every project. And this is because every colorwork motif is going to be a little different. It may be that in some colorwork motifs you have an easy time doing what I just did, which is to duplicate stitches and follow those stitches. And it may be in other projects that there are so many strands like there are in this one that becomes almost impossible to do. And so for this, I'm going to show you how I weave in my end for a stranded colorwork project that has lots and lots of little floats. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I have good tension on that end. So I've put this on my tapestry needle. I'm going to flip this to the other side. If the stitch is loose, I need to give it a little tighten. If it looks too tight because I've been pulling on it too much, then I need to loosen that up. So just make sure that you're happy with the tension of that stitch on the right side of your work before you start weaving in the end on the wrong side of your work. For this method, I like to use a sharp tapestry needle, and what I like to do is I actually like to catch a couple of plies from several of the floats on the wrong side of my work. Now, since they're floats, you don't need to worry about whether or not they're in color 1 or color 6. In fact, I like to catch a little bit of everything on the wrong side of my work. I also, if possible, like to go at a diagonal when I do this. So I'm catching a ply or two from the floats at a diagonal, and I'm trying not to skip too many in the distance that I'm catching these floats. So you can see I'm catching a couple of strands on those floats, inserting my needle to split those plies along this diagonal, but those floats are really quite close together. And I'm going to do that for about an inch or an inch and a half. So you can see I've come at a diagonal, and once again, this is where I really suggest flipping to the right side of your work, making sure you can't see any of the silver from your tapestry needle showing through, or any little bits of yarn somehow, or, and finally, this is the important one, it's important that you don't see any stitches being pulled because you've picked at one of those floats on the wrong side of your work. So if everything looks in order on the right side of your work, flip back to the wrong side of your work, and then we're just going to gently pull that yarn through. Now, here's where things can get a little tricky. If you pull too tight, that can pucker your work on the right side. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So if you pull too tight, it'll stretch some of those stitches out of order. So just make sure you keep that nice and loose. In fact, it's always good to give that a gentle stretch and check the right side of your work. So for me, this looks like it's looking good. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over just a little to the left. Since my diagonal came down from left to right, I'm going to come over a little to the left, and I'm going to catch strands once again going up in this direction. So I'm going to be working from the bottom from left to right at another diagonal, and I'm going to cross over the first strand of this color 1 end. So I'm just going to catch those plies on the wrong side of my work for the floats, catching a little bit of color 1 and color 6. And when I come back to this strand, this end, I'm actually going to split that strand, and this is going to lock that strand in place. So I'm catching a couple of plies from the tail that I'm currently weaving in as I go back across. And then I'm just going to continue to pick up those little plies from the floats. One thing I would suggest is not coming too close to the upper edge of your cowl. If you get too close to the upper edge of your cowl, when you fray the ends, they might show as you take your cowl on and off. And so I've worked about an inch, and I'm just going to pull that through. Once again, I'm doing it really gently so as not to pucker it, and I am going to, once again, kind of pull in all directions. And then flip that to the right side of my work. That looks good. And now I'm going to snip the end of my strand, and then I'm going to fray that end to help secure that in place. And so you'll see on the wrong side of my work, it is really obvious where this strand is woven in. That's okay with me. On the wrong side of my work, as long as it is secure, I have accomplished my goal. On the right side of my work, that strand is not showing. None of the stitches are stretched out of place. In fact, I'm really happy with that. And I feel confident that when I block this cowl later, that those strands will stay in place. And if I needed to make any adjustments, I still have a little bit of a tail that I can work with. And once again, if you use a different method for weaving in your ends, I fully support that. If some other method works better for you, then I think go ahead and do it. And this is just how I like to weave in my ends, and this is how I have been doing it for a long time, and I'm really pleased with the results. I know that they're going to be secure, and that is how I weave in colors 1, 2, and 6 near the join of my Halloween Party Mystery Cowl. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching.